will not make it out of this COVID-19 pandemic, especially since there are some of them that are very old people. I mean, one of the biggest civil society leaders in Ambazonia, Dr. Mfongalamfo, is in his late 70s. He's been held there. We have retired Dr. Kiko. He's also in his mid 70s. He's been held there. We have there's Pastor, sorry, I've just blanked out. He too is in his late 70s. So we have a lot of old people there who have health issues, and plus the poor nutrition situation, and especially the leadership had the unfortunate situation that when the Cameroon government first kidnapped them out of Nigeria, which is a completely different story for a different time, and brought them to Cameroon, the government locked them in isolation without access to sunlight for 10 months. So all of them had the problem that the calcium in their bones started breaking down and in their muscles. So by the time the government, out of international pressure, finally accepted to allow them to be moved into normal cells, all of them have essentially been into these current health problems where because of that massive loss of calcium from their bones and muscles, all of them have their health situation has kind of gotten really worse. So the prisoners then decided that while they don't know what's going to happen, some of them had already started getting symptoms of being sick. They decided that they were going to issue at least one last call. Their logic is that before prisoners get executed across the world, apparently some countries, some situations, people allow the prisoners to make one last switch. And so the prisoners said their last demand, their last request before they get executed by COVID-19 was for the international community, activists and everybody to push for a UN mandated independent fact-finding mission. That was their demand. Their understanding is that at least the people who have been violently murdered in the course of this crisis would at least get some justice, some sort of information of what happened to their relatives. And of course, they hope, under the understanding, like our Sister Shirley was saying, that fact-finding mission would open the door, first, to stop the massive killings that are still going on, but second, open the possibility for peace negotiations. The most recent experience of the international system is that most conflicts where there have been fact-finding missions have been properly unwound. Even the Uppsala Institute of Conflict Data proposed that for all conflict mediation, there must be an aspect of accountability for war crimes for the peace resolution to be sustainable. We know the situation in Sri Lanka when the UN mandated a fact-finding mission there. The number of people being killed dramatically went down. We know the situation that as our sister mentioned for Myanmar. The killings in Myanmar have not stopped, but everybody involved in that campaign acknowledges that the fact-finding mission has dramatically reduced that. We also know that the situation in Burundi as well got dramatically cut down because of fact-finding mission. The point is that people committing these crimes suddenly become aware that there will be accountability. And that tends to have a very serious damping effect on the crimes. People tend to back off these crimes. And so the prisoners decided to write a letter. And even though there are, at this point, about 3,000 prisoners scattered all over the place, the majority of them are in these two prisons. So they managed to sneak the letter that they wrote by hand out of the one prison. They got people to sign, they transferred to another prison in these two facilities that they could afford to circulate this letter around. They finally got 138 of them signing this letter saying they commit on behalf of all 3,000 political prisoners to appeal to the international community that their last wish before they get executed by COVID-19 is for the international community to push for the UN to mandate an international fact-finding mission on the crisis in the territory. So that conversation started happening, and of course, Floyd happened. George Floyd was cold-bloodedly killed in Minnesota. And since then, it has exposed this fundamental problem that we've always known have been around, but has never got the kind of visibility, the issue of the value of Black lives. We understand that at the core of all these experiences is this narrative that somehow Black people are less than human. And this narrative is so insidious and so pervasive and so deep that when research was done in America among medical doctors, more than 50% of American, 60%, I think more than 60% of American medical doctors, these are specialists, accepted in the document that somehow Black people resist more pain than white people, right? So this is just an illustration of how deep this racist narrative about Black people is. And when it comes to the context of the crisis in Ambazonia, Ambazonia is one of what you consider, if you can look at the Uppsala data for conflict, is one of 19 major conflicts happening in Africa. Of those 19 major conflicts, 17 of them are happening in what we call Francophone countries. In other words, if you switch off the conflicts in what we call these Francophone countries, you have just 2 conflicts in Africa, even though everybody thinks Africa is constantly under conflict. I mean, if you look at the numbers, what you see is that essentially Francophone territories, which make up about 5% of the human population, account for more than 30% of the human conflicts in the world. And the only reason that is that way is because these Francophone territories are textbook colonial definition of colonies of France. In other words, colony is a territory where one country invades by force or some other means, but imposes its will on the people for the purpose of the benefit of the colonizing power. I'm talking about African colonialism in particular, not settler colonialism, in which resources and the lives of the people and everything is tailored to serve the interests of the country that colonized them. Well, that is a textbook definition of colonialism. And these Francophone countries are exactly that. In other words, these countries are the only countries in the world that don't have a central bank and are not allowed to have a central bank. Why? So that all the trade that goes in and out of those countries must go through France. All of the money goes to the French treasury, which is just textbook definition of colonialism. The difference between now and before the UN declared colonialism a crime against humanity is that they have a flag, they have an anthem, and they have a Black guy who's there. I mean, in the case of Cameroon, not only do they have a Black guy who's responsible, they also have in secret agreements that if the president is sick and cannot perform his duties, the French ambassador will step in to manage the country. And that's not only in Cameroon, that's the same thing with Chad, Central African Republic, Gabon, most of these countries that fall in this category. And it's not because the French have been so smart in packaging and hiding this colonialism. It's been in the open. The only reason in part why the world has looked away and allowed that to happen is this idea again of the Black person, of people of African descent, of people, non-white people being less than human. And so they don't deserve this, us following the textbook definition of what is supposed to be. Otherwise, it's hard to imagine how the world would tolerate 50 years down the road that there are countries like Cameroon, where essentially the country does not have a central bank, the economy goes through France. Cameroon cannot sign a major contract with any country for supplies of any form. Government contracts are predetermined for the French. The French military has a right, without any new arrangement, to put a military base in Cameroon anytime they want, and they do have a lot of bases. And French soldiers can go from Cameroon to go fight people in Chad who oppose the regime there, to go fight people in Central African Republic who oppose the regime there, and come right back. The same thing with Gabon and all these other countries. So in essence, the world has accepted that it's okay for French colonialism to go on as long as the victims of the colonialism are people that look
Thank you.
African. So I want to say this is the connection I was trying to make about the Black Lives Matter aspect that we inserted into this campaign. The fact that the Black lives that are in Ambazonia, but also in this whole entire Francophone territories, those lives should matter. Those people should have fundamental rights as they should everywhere in the world, whether countries are historical accidents or the current accepted political outline of how regions are run. These countries should be allowed the same rights that people elsewhere have to determine their own destiny. So that's how the Black Lives Matter element in terms of the conversation came in. Of course, we are all in solidarity with the people of African descent in the United States. Some of them are our direct relatives, some of them are ancestors. It's not lost to anybody that in California, one of the victims of this recent police violence is originally from Ambazonia, who was here like a refugee. And so we thought that if we're going to do any campaign, it would be worth it to make the connection so that people don't just look at the things, but we see that there's this global moment that we all can look beyond just, the current discourse that is happening within the United States, so that the global discourse is not this one-sided, oh, we want Americans to be great. It should be, we want Americans to respect the rights of people of African descent. It should be that we need globally to respect the rights and of people of African descent. And so that's how the Black Lives Matter element got into this conversation. But I would like to conclude that we are also part of a network called Racial Justice Has No Borders Coalition. That network was started before all of this happened. And this was part of the issues of that network, that we should be able to make clear globally this racist exploitation and abuse and the militarization of the world under the agenda of the military-industrial complex. And our comrades from World Resistance League, who are also part co-sponsors of this event, led that Racial Justice Have No Borders coalition, which is a pretty huge coalition. And I would like to hand the floor now to Tori, who is here with us, who's from World Resistance League, who was one of the main engines behind that coalition. And also right now, as World Resistance League has become a very central piece of the global effort within the United States in particular, to also make sure that this movement for Black Lives Matter gets the hearing that it deserves in the public space. So I'll hand it over to Tori for his comment before Amy takes it back. Thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry I rambled some there. Tori, please.
Yeah, and I'll try and keep it relatively tight so we make sure we have time for questions. Yeah, so my name is Tori. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the national campaigner at War Resisters League. And as Sphinx talked about, really the big collaboration that War Resisters League and Ambazonia Prisoners of Conscience has been doing has been around this emerging coalition, Racial Justice Has No Borders, which was born out of conversations in sort of Palestinian organizing space at a meeting at the Highlander Center in Tennessee, really talking about how do we bring the sort of anti-militarist movement and the racial justice movement here in this country, and bring it in both to have more of an internationalist analysis and also understand more completely how those two things inform each other, and especially like how oppression sort of gets informed by both like the militarization of policing, but also like the military learning from the police as well, how those two things inform each other. And so Racial Justice Has No Borders is currently it's 19 organizations operating together as a coalition. We're in the middle of sort of finalizing we were literally going to have our final strategic planning conversation on June 3rd, and then everything happened. So we have pushed that conversation, but we will be finalizing the points of unity for the organization and sort of our strategic vision, and then bringing that back out to sort of continue our work. But our big focus has been sort of seeing the ways that we see the equipment, technologies, and strategies that were developed in the War on Terror really informing the way that state violence is used here in the United States as well. I think it's actually supposedly for fighting Boko Haram or institutions like this, but we know really where they're being used is in places like Ambazonia. And so that's sort of our big sort of internationalist coalition currently. Organizations with a handful of sort of support groups, and then some anti-mil and racial justice focus groups here in the US. Yeah, and then I think I'll wrap it up there just to make sure that we have some time for questions. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Tori and Sphinx and Shirley. I just wanted to loop back briefly to the campaign. I posted the link into the room, and if you didn't get a chance to look at it yet, if you could click through and take a look at it now. We've been working hard on this campaign. Again, this is a campaign basically to add our voices to support what the political prisoners are asking for. And you know, it's really timely right now because after many years of careful work, the political prisoners who include the leadership of the movement are in a position where they may be able to carve out space for legitimate peace talks. And so We really want to support them, and through allies in the international community, we'll do that. And the way this campaign is set up is to go to the members of, go to decision makers in your region, and ask them to act. And this comes also after years of Ambazonians making similar requests of their decision makers in the US and in other countries, going to Washington, DC, going from room to room, talking to as many aides as possible, trying to help people understand the situation and the stakes. So we've got a lot of people with a lot of wisdom on this call. So I know it's a little, the normal thing to do at this time would be to ask the group for questions, but we're just gonna take 10 minutes and jump into small groups. And we're gonna ask people to just consider a couple of very simple questions while you're in the small group, which is you could share with each other what was your awareness about the situation before this call. Some people might have never heard of it. Other people might actually be Ambazonian refugees and have direct experience of the situation. What questions do you have about the situation? And what ideas do you have about how to maximize our ability to help with this campaign? So I'm going to put those 3 questions in the room, in the chat here, and then I'm going to send you all into groups. And does 10 minutes seem like a good time to people? We usually try to go to about 6:30 for these calls. So then, or would 15 be better? What do people think? Any opinions?
I think 15.
15?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that feels right.
Okay, all right, we'll do 15 then. So I'm just trying to put everybody into a group here. There we go. All right, I'm gonna hit the magic button. Then I think you have to like press a button too to accept to join the room. Okay, everybody, here we go.
Where's the room? Where's the room?
Joyce and Eleanor, if you're there, you should see an opportunity to join a breakout room. Let me know if you're having trouble finding that. Hi, Pamela, how are you? We just went into breakout rooms. So I'm just gonna send you into one, just a minute here. I'm gonna try to send you at least. Just a sec. Add to a breakout room. Pamela, are you there? Can you hear me? Pamela, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. So I was going to try to send you to a breakout room, but for some reason I'm not exactly sure how to do that. But did you just arrive? Did you miss the presentation, or did you?
Well, I have an insecure, or whatever. My
connection.
computer, my connection is bad, so
Yeah.
I don't even stay on.
Okay.
I didn't hear a lot of the presentation.
You didn't, unfortunately?
I did. I heard a lot.
Oh, good. Well, I don't know why I can't figure out how to add you to a group. Let me just try one thing here. Yeah, that is so weird. Like, because I should be able to see you. Yeah, for some reason I can't. Well, I guess we could just be a group here if you want.
For today. Did you record this?
What'd you say?
Are you recording this?
Oh, yeah, we did record I could pause it during.
I feel terrible. It looked like I just
No,
overwhelmed.
no. Thanks, everybody. Any other comments or ideas? I know, I think, Max, are you there? I did see Max get back on. Shirley, do you want to try to summarize Max's comment, or is there any other small group that has insights?
Yeah, I can, and Matt, if you can help me if I miss a step or Tori. So Max was saying how there's another step that can be taken with a special rapporteur to the United Nations, and just bringing up the individual cases to them directly, so that the special rapporteur then just works on that case. And so it's not as big as the UN fact-finding mission. It's a smaller scale, but it forces Cameroon to react, right? It puts them in a position to where they have to answer, and they have to like allow this special rapporteur to go in and to investigate. And so I wanted him to talk more about that, but that's another avenue that we could look into that I'm happy to look into. Sphinx.
Yeah, Amy, you wanted to talk about the case of Penn, or you want me to talk about it? So go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so the special rapporteur system we understand that that's a very important tool. We've been trying to use it on all our political prisoners. I hope some people have seen the new, there's an article that was published, I think on the New York Times or something about Black Lives Matter issues at the UN, about the racism and manipulation and games within the UN itself. There was a recent article about that. One of the things that happened to us in the special rapporteur that just went out, he's a nice guy. I hope I don't want to accuse him, but I'm just saying that the system made it impossible for him to operate. So we have one of the leaders that we have in jail is called Penn Terence. Penn Terence was the principal of one of the Ambazonian most elite colleges called public colleges called Cameroon College of Art, Science and Technology. He was the vice principal there. And the way the Cameroon government decided to deal with Penn was that they understood that if they were to arrest Penn, this famous recognized teacher and union leader, that would signal to all the other teachers that if we can arrest this guy, we can arrest anybody else in the teaching field. And that really worked in terms of paralyzing the teachers union. So we wrote a lot of letters for Penn's case to the UN rapporteur on torture and on Michel is his name. He's the outgoing now. We wrote a lot of letters to him. And before the current UN Human Rights Commissioner, he did a lot of, he would write sometimes and complain about the trials of the journalists and all of that. But then what he did after the new Human Rights Commissioner came was that he would write letters to Cameroon government about the treatment and trials of these people, and the Cameroon government would essentially reply talking about roads or some totally disconnected thing. He would issue a statement thanking the Cameroon government for replying to his letter, but saying, but you didn't answer any of the questions I asked. And so there's this, it's almost a feeling of games going on, but that's not to say that we have not been trying to exploit that. There's a new UN Human Rights Commissioner that just came in. One of our partners in terms of support of political prisoners is the biggest human rights organization in Cameroon. It's called REDAC. So I happen to be an Ambazonian prisoner of conscience member, but I also happen to be on the board of REDAC, which translates as Central African Human Rights Defenders Network. And REDAC has been campaigning to get the various rapporteurs to do a little bit more than they have been doing this far. So I really appreciate the mention of that, and that we are doing our very best to scale up our work with the rapporteurs, and we hope that with the new people coming, they're going to add new blood to that. I yield.
Great. So we have a question that's been put in the chat. And I know we're inching towards, we've just passed 6:30. We usually try to wrap up by 6:30. I don't want to have too many people leave before we mention the good news about Senator Penn's case. Sphinx, do you want to do that? I think you know the details better.
So the details are that Senator Penn's case for a long time, we call it Senator Penn is the same, the teacher, the principal, all of us
call him senator.
We call him senator. So for a long time, the Cameroon government arrested him that he was involved in, they didn't charge him for almost 3 years. And then eventually they charged him for hatred against the motherland and terrorism and everything. And then, of course, the human rights rapporteur was totally livid about that. And a lot of human rights organizations were complaining about that. And we tried to appeal the case was never accepted. So the good news is that the case, the appeal of the case has been accepted. And essentially, some of the charges that were made up against him have been dropped, but that he's going to be tried again at least. So that's really good news, and we are hoping that this second trial is going to be a lot fair and you know would come up to something. On the question of ECHO, I want to say, so people should not get mistaken. So the ECHO is the Cameroon government and all these French governments, they do not have an economy, they cannot. All of their money must come through France. The way that is managed is through a currency called the Central African franc, or it used to be called the colonial French African franc. And then, you know, there's no more colonial, so they changed it to Central Africa. I like the change, but who cares? Anyway, so over the years, that has been very emblematic of the continuation of French colonialism, because you can't argue your way around it. And so most recently, the group of countries in West Africa decided that they want to create an economic zone with a currency called ECHO. And there are some of these Francophone countries that the French control in that area. And so for them to stay out, the economy was going to be crushed. So they decided that they would join that. And so people thought this would be an opportunity for them to get away from the French control currency. What instead happened was that about a month before the meeting for that currency to be announced, the French government held a meeting with the French-speaking countries, and they declared that their French colonial currency, the name had been changed to the ECHO. That's the name of this new currency that everybody was planning. And so now there are two kinds of ECHO. Think of it like the euro, right? There's the ECHO that was supposed to cover the whole West African region, and there's the ECHO that is specifically for this, the new name for this French currency that is controlled from Paris. So I think the reality is that Africans, especially those under Francophone territories, which are these countries that have, where we have a lot of the wars and the crisis in Africa, are fighting to free themselves. And this game about the money thing has not been bought by anybody. It's clear, it's very transparent to everybody that it's just a game. I yield, I'm sorry. I wanted to try to answer that since I've been asked that a lot of times lately.
Yeah, should we also clarify too that that only applies to the countries that were using the West African franc? Or,
yes.
And Cameroon uses the Central African franc.
African franc, yes.
And so the other countries that use that currency, there are no changes either to the actual name, no cosmetic changes,
nothing,
but also no changes to the terms, yes. Which the ECO, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but is that there was some improvement of the terms of that, you know.
So the improvement is that, so currently, since those countries do not have an economy, their national reserves are all in the French treasury. 60% of their reserve is supposed to be in the French treasury. Those countries, if they want to borrow money from their own savings in the French treasury, they can only borrow 20%. And the French government has the right to refuse to give them even that 20% for loan. Well, so, and also there's something called the board of directors of the bank of the CFA. In that board of directors, more than a third of them were French people. And then the Africans, there were a few Africans there. So the French government announced that, well, now that board is going to be, there's going to be only one French person there. So that's quite an improvement, I think. The fact remains that that board is irrelevant because the French treasury really runs both the money and everything. So those cosmetic changes, again, like you said, only happen to the West African CFA, not to the one in the Central African region.
Can I just add that they get to borrow their own money and they have to pay interest on it?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Any last comments? This has been a great discussion. If we can just remind you to fill out the letter. It takes a few steps. You have to kind of be a little persistent. you have to click start writing, and then you have to sort of go through and like make sure that all the fields are kind of checked correctly. For some of the, depending on which kind of district you're in, your congressperson might like say, oh, you have to pick a topic to say what topic it falls into. So it takes a little bit of time to get the letter configured. And of course you have the ability to add your own text if you would like to modify the letter. The default is the one the campaign has written, but if you feel moved, you can add your own comments. And we would really encourage people to do that. And also please share with your networks and ask them to do it. Shirley, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I have a question. I know before, Amy, that you and Sphinx did a teach-in, and I was wondering, like, as a follow-up to this, would you guys be doing something like that? And then B, is there a way to like anybody who wants to be contacted, who's on this call, who wants to be contacted as you guys do further teach-ins and things about Ambazonia, or like updates or like things we can be a part of, a way that we could like put our name on that list? Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. We do have people's, emails since they registered for the event, and so we can send the recording and also as a follow-up to this email, and maybe folks can opt in to like continuing to receive updates after that, if that's okay with people. And in terms of whether we should have another teach-in, I mean, like we would really love feedback about like, whether this was helpful, in what ways, like were there gaps like that, because at least, I don't know, other people might have different experiences, but for me, I had never heard of Ambazonia before I met Sphinx. And like I think a lot of people that's true for, and of course there's a lot of little places that are like small geographically but important, and that we often don't know anything about them. So what can we do to improve like the information that we're presenting? We would really value any feedback that you have. It looks like that one got a hand. Okay, good. Jim.
Yes, could you just name the legislation we should be supporting again? You had one in the Senate and one in the House. Can you tell us?
So the one in the Senate is Senate Resolution 292. It's gonna be, it's in the Senate. The one in the House already passed. So at this point, we just need members of the House to write to the ambassador at the UN asking for the US to, the ambassador to lead the request for an international fact-finding mission, for the Security Council to mandate an international fact-finding mission. I mean, we fought for that. Activists that are doing solidarity for Libya have fought for that. They only gave one for Libya last week. For people who are following international news, you know how horrible Libya has become. It's become the place where real slave trade is happening. African people are caught off seas and being sold, right? And after all these years that we've been fighting, finally, the UN finally decided last week to mandate an international fact-finding mission to Libya. This is very, very important. So for the House, if you do a follow-up call, you ask your congressperson to support, to ask that they support a fact-finding mission. In the Senate, that's the bill that has not yet passed. It's Senate Resolution 292.
And could you send us a sample letter that you want us to send to our ambassador?
Well, Sphinx, just correct me if I'm wrong, but does it mention 292 explicitly in the Action Network?
No, the Action Network does not mention 292. The Action Network is a letter that goes directly to the congressperson, asking them to push for the fact-finding mission. That letter that you sign, the petition, if you sign it, it will generate that kind of a letter. It's not as detailed as it should be. It says to support the UN, but we can also send you.
Yes. Send us the link to the Action Network, because I don't know what that link is.
I just posted it. Let me post it again. 1 second on the chat.
Yeah, but we can also, in the follow-up, we will include information on how to take action for the Senate Resolution 292. Thank you for that.
And a letter to the ambassador too.
Yes.
Okay, sure. Jim, are you able to see the link right now? I just posted the link again.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And later to the ambassador. Okay.
So I think we have Warren Cooper is going to do a closing for us. And if anybody else wants to stick around after the closing and continue to chat, you're welcome to, but I want to give people a chance to have that closure before they jump off.
Thanks, Amy. So as a member of the community of living traditions and part of the Christian community there, I thought to share a few verses of a psalm which has over the years been one of my go-to psalms when it seems like the enemy forces are gaining ground and have exercised advantage. It is the first 6 verses of Psalm 37. It's a psalm of David, and it reads this way: "Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. Trust in God and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in God, and God will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to God. Trust in God, and God will act. God will bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday." Our prayer is that it will be so. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.